Okay, so I'm going to take you through this interactive on Dodd-Frank. You can see from this New York Times, which shows many of the provisions of the Dodd-Frank Act have yet to be finalized. And one of the things that they're saying is that Wall Street is spending a lot of money on trying to tame or tweak some of the costly regulations. And you can see right here that the group that's actually investing the most is the securities and investment firms. Another thing that's kind of big is that over the past 2 years after Dodd-Frank was passed, only a third of the regulations are in place, falling significantly short of the law's goals. Of the 398 mandated rules, 237 should be finished by now, but only 133 are complete. This next interactive I'll show you is from The Nation. It illustrates how finance reform laws have been under siege from Wall Street. As you can see, the top 5 consumer protection groups, these are the guys who are on the side of Dodd-Frank, only sent 20 lobbyists to Wall Street. That same year, in 2012, top finance lobbyists sent 406 lobbyists. The next interactive is from the New York Times, and it shows 3 big regulators: Treasury, the Federal Reserve, and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. This tracks the numbers of meetings that consumer groups have had with these regulators. You can see here it's only about 36 meetings, as opposed to the big banks, which set up 115 meetings. The next thing I'm showing you is from USA Today, which shows the progression of the percentage of rules that have been completed since April 2012. Going back to our themes, the first tab shows the overall progress, and the second tab shows the rules that have been finalized. It's right now at 40.3%, where 70.3% should have been completed. The next section shows that the rules that have been proposed, the ones that have not been proposed, and the last tab shows the breakdown of the number of rules that have been finalized and what was required. In this next part, I want to give you a clip from Barney Frank. He's talking in 2012 about the lobbying power that Dodd-Frank experienced.
But here's the key point that people miss. The lobbying power, frankly, doesn't come from the big banks and their big money. The community banks, the smaller banks, beat the big banks. And people ought to understand this. It's a good thing about America. Money is important, but votes will beat money any day.
According to Barney, banks didn't play a huge role, the big ones at least, in preventing Dodd-Frank from passing. In fact, many of them were silent about it, and there were reasons behind it. One of the reasons was attributed to the fact that many didn't know how these laws would translate into rules. Now here's another section of the video. Charlie Rose is basically asking Barney Frank about how Dodd-Frank will do now that the Republicans control the House. This question clarifies what Posner and Conlon were talking about. With partisan bills, Democrats seize on opportunities like Obama being elected, the House and the Senate being both Democrat, and they wanted to pass a very Democrat-oriented bill. To this, Barney Frank gives a really interesting answer on why he doesn't think that the Republicans are a big threat to Dodd-Frank.
Yes, we got a lot of power to the regulators. The reason, by the way, is twofold. First of all, things change. If we say that there needs to be a certain amount of, there needs to be more capital to offset what they do. We don't want them so leveraged. The more capital a bank has, the less likely it is to fail when it's made on loans. I don't know what that number is today, and I also know that whatever that number is today, that might not be the right number 5 years from now. So we left it to the regulators because we want to have flexibility. For people who think, and you didn't suggest this, but I know some have said, well, these could all be weakened by the regulators. But the fact is that with the Obama administration in place, you have regulators who help write the bill.
Yeah, but what they also say is that this Republican Congress in the Republican-controlled House will do things it hopes will lessen the power to enforce it.
But it'll be hard. They'll be hard pressed to do it. They won't be able to change things substantively because 2 reasons. First of all, the Senate won't go along and the President won't go along. Secondly, and there's a difference here between financial reform and health care and the environment. Where health care and the environment are concerned, the Republican Party is united. The very pure ideological free market conservatives and the Tea Party are together. But when it comes to financial reform, not so much.
Exactly.
The ideological free market conservatives believe that derivatives should be unregulated. The Tea Party's not that crazy about derivatives. There's a populist element there. They don't mind us regulating credit cards. They don't mind us doing some of this regulation. So they haven't yet tried to undo it altogether. But you're right.
The Tea Party people don't mind regulation, even though they don't like big government.
They don't like, well, people are not always consistent.
Now, while Barney doesn't think Republicans are a big threat, it's clear right now in 2013 that rules are being overturned. Going back to the interactive from the New York Times, we see an example of how a rule has been vacated. This law relates to setting limits on the positions of on the size of positions that commodity traders can hold. So this was a rule that was supposed to be enforced. Here's the process that it went through. This is Dodd-Frank becoming a law. The regulator is the CFTC. And you can see these are the people in favor and against the rules. These are just quotes from them. In January 2011, the rule is proposed by a 4-1 vote by the CFTC. By October 2011, the rule is completed and it's set to go, but then at the end of the year, it gets challenged, and 2 industry groups challenge the rule. In September of 2012, the rule is then vacated and sent back to the CFTC for further investigation. By November 2012, CFTC changes its position and vacates the rule. But it wouldn't be fair for me to give a one-sided representation, so I wanted to show a clip from the American Bankers Association.
Take all the regulations we had and now turn them up significantly, maybe a whole order of magnitude. And that's what's happened in recent years. But unfortunately, we're concerned that the largest wave is yet to come as we're looking at the implementation of the Dodd-Frank Act. One of our biggest concerns about Dodd-Frank is that it not only tries to fix a problem, it tries to fix the problem 2, 3, 4, 5 different ways. And what we're saying is, if we find a problem, fine. But let's fix it only once, instead of trying to fix it in so many different ways.
The ironic thing about it is the only growth area inside some of the banks is the compliance department.
I was in Nebraska, and I had one of their bankers say, resource allocation, 1.2 employees are compliance people for every one person who's making loans, creating product and selling, and making money possible for the bank.
The regulations are impacting banks across the country. We're hearing that it's impacting their capital. We're hearing that it's impacting their compliance costs. We're hearing that it's impacting their ability to lend.